Immediately after leaving his appointment, Cal headed to the grocery store in preparation for his date, in the off chance that Gwen wanted to come inside his house and got hungry. An array of really unspectacular shit filled his cart. Onion, cucumber, canned chili, Spam, by the time he got through his shopping and got to the checkout line. The going was slow, but the line progressed before coming to a grinding halt when Cal was the third person in line. The glasses-wearing, presumably teenaged cashier had stopped swiping the scanner and stood still as the gargantuan mustached man before him gave him an earful. The one-sided conflict had been born of a 25-cent coupon for a $3 can of Del Monte green beans not being accepted by the system. Realizing that the man was not going to relent, the boy picked up the PA and called for a manager. Despite his efforts, 5 minutes passed without the emergence of a manager. As the debacle played past the 10-minute mark, a thought floated through Cal's mind.
It's 25 freaking cents, you cheap son of a bitch. Just let the man ring your shit up so the rest of us can get on with our lives before I shove some quarters down your throat.
Within a matter of seconds, an overhead light snapped off from the ceiling and careened into the metal cash register. The employee was caught by surprise and the end of the light fixture. The light smashed against the youth's arm, dislocating and lacerating it, as well as the cash register, with such a force that it splintered open. Fragments of metal and glass shot across the lane and the area behind it, somehow managing to only hit the mustached bargaineer. The large man hit the ground screaming in response to the shards throughout his body as blood leaked out of a particularly nasty cut on an artery on his right leg. As if fulfilling a prophecy, coins rained down from the wreckage of the register. But of special note were the quarters which hit the ground, rolling into the open mouth of the screaming man. Mr. Mustache's gullet became obstructed and grounded. The injured man became even more panicked, frenzied. His cut forearms weakly reached for his throat as he choked. All the while, a dark tide of red dripped from his gashes and sprayed forth from the punctured artery. Instead of moving forward to help, everyone stepped back, either out of shock or a desire not to get bloody. A piss-poor imitation of a gurgle came from the choker, and he escalated into smashing his head against the concrete floor. Some onlookers may have thought that this was an attempt to loosen some of the quarters lodged in his throat, but no. That would have been giving him too much credit. Instead, the act was one of madness brought on by hopelessness and a dire lack of oxygen. The man's forehead began to bruise purple, or perhaps the coloration was from the lack of oxygen, not entirely unlike a very mishandled potato. His pupils soon enlarged, and his movements slowed. A complete cease followed. No one at the checkout lane bothered to check for a pulse to confirm the man's death. In fact, they all did the opposite and beelined out of the lane and out the nearest exit in a panic. Cal, however, stared at the corpse in shock, while blocking out the cashier's screams and cries for someone to help lift the fallen light fixture off of his arm.
Oh God, I did this. I once again thought of killing someone and they died. Am I psychic?
Cal's staring was brief, and then he also made a retreat for an exit, just as a crowd started to gather around the lane. In a similar manner to the incident at the hospital, Cal sat in his Mustang and regained his composure before driving home. This time, he managed to book it out of the parking lot and a few blocks down before being passed by an ambulance and a handful of police cars in the opposing lane. He felt sick to his stomach from what he had witnessed and the realization that he had somehow killed someone. Once again. Therefore, upon his return home, he plopped straight into bed and attempted to sleep the rest of the day away with limited success. Most of his time in bed was spent lying awake and pondering if he had psychic powers and how to test them. Was it possible to do so without killing anyone? Did he have any other abilities? Or was there another explanation for all this that didn't amount to coincidence and was quite reasonable? His thinking session was interrupted soon after the sun had set and darkness had taken hold. A loud, spirited laugh resounded from within Cal's house, and much to Cal's fear, it didn't belong to him. Cal shot straight up as if he intended to react bravely or stupidly to his unwanted guest. However, his courage was lacking, and he could do no more than maintain that position out of fear. A raspy but playful, almost encouraging, masculine-sounding voice resounded from within the bedroom, causing Iburn to frequently gaze around in an attempt to place the voice to a body. He did so without success.
What curious and imaginative thoughts you have, for a rabid man, I mean.
Cal, who was shaking and tightly clutching the covers, pushed a response out, bit by bit.
Who's there? Are you with the government?
A laugh that was even louder than the first resounded from within the room, and sounded as if it were nearer than the first had been, perhaps underneath the bed.
With the government? Me? How wrong you are, Calvin. You are as wrong about that idea as the idea of having powers.
Curiosity and a fear of what the individual in the room knew partially managed to erode Calvin's fear of death, and thus his words came out more clearly.
Who are you? And what do you know about what is happening to me?
The voice boomed without missing a beat. While the voice spoke, the frightened man was able to pinpoint the voice's origin. It was coming from beneath him. Why he couldn't see the intruder now made sense. He was underneath the bed. His eyes darted for the bedroom door. Alas, his legs did not, for his curiosity and doubt weighted him down to the bed. He listened intently as the voice spoke.
Both questions you have asked are the same. You only need to look toward your gut for the answer. Seriously, lift up your shirt and look.
The man sat still and silent for a few seconds, uncertain if he'd be attacked while occupied with his shirt. In the end, he relented and hesitantly lifted his shirt above his stomach. A whoosh of air escaped his lips as he stared in disbelief at his stomach. His scars, specifically. What should have been a fresh pink color was instead a dark and somehow vibrant black. Ink was the best comparison that his mind could conjure. The etchings were not only irregular in color, but also pulsing.
Hello, Calvin.
The raspy, playful tone of voice resounded from Calvin's now blackened scar maze. The most feminine scream to ever leave the adult's lips did so in that instant. He recoiled from his bed, hitting his head on the nightstand that sat next to it, which caused the lamp to be cast down on his already sore head. Luckily, the lamp didn't shatter and rolled onto the floor beside him.
What the hell is going on?
He shrieked from his newly claimed spot on the floor. No response came from the oddity that was his scars. The sound of heavy breathing, nearing the point of hyperventilation, played throughout the bedroom.
What is happening to me?
He muttered dejectedly. A single-worded response was given.
Greatness.
Tears trailed from the man's eyes as his mental faculties began to break down.
Leave me alone, demon.
He responded in a wailing tone, not dissimilar to that of a punished child.
Demon? Your likening me to hellspawn is most insulting.
Cal, who was sobbing deeply, replied in a meek voice, with long gasps of air in between each word.
Satan? Oh God. Why me?
The occupier of his scars became most agitated and let it seep into its now authoritative tone.
No, I am Durdur.
The 32-year-old rocked back and forth, cradling the lamp with a somber expression as he sat on the floor.
Oh Christ. My powers are destroying my mind. I'm going insane.
The self-proclaimed Durdrum's patience had worn thin, and it now began to shout in a near-primal voice, a tone so deep and guttural that would likely make any such practitioner's throat raw.
I'm not a demon. I'm not a devil. And you are not insane or psychic. This is real and happening. Get over yourself. You had no problem accepting things as they were when it was convenient to you. Accept me.
After the hysterics ended, Cal spoke again.
What are you, and why have you chosen me? I do not know. I simply just am.
For the first time, Calvin grew a pair and snapped back in frustration.
You lie. How could you be so adamant about what you are not, yet not know what you are? What if I am? What could you possibly do about it? I am Durdrum, and that is all you need to know. You should be thankful I clued you in on that much, Cal.
If Durdrum had a face, Calvin suspected it would be smiling based upon the smugness that exuded from its response. On the opposite end of town, detectives Arthur Pendrake and Monty Bedivere sat sequestered in a back room of a Hanover police department, analyzing security footage which had captured the two strange deaths over the past week and a half. The scruffy-faced Arthur clasped a hand on his coworker's shoulder as he paused the tape and pointed at the screen with the other. Monty turned from his screen, followed his partner's finger, and traveled up the screen with his hazels.
What about it? That guy was in line at the store,
Arthur exclaimed enthusiastically as he mashed his finger against the recording of Calvin Iburn. The detective rechecked the footage on his monitor, and sure enough, both security tapes did indeed contain the same individual.
It looks like you might be right about these cases being homicides. I'll be damned if I know how he could have pulled it off, though. Any ideas?
Arthur shook his head.
Not a one. The way I figured it. It's all too perfect to be an actual coincidence. But it is all circumstantial, so there isn't much we can do. However, we could figure out who he is and just so happen to be in the same area as he is and keep an eye on him.
The two detectives high-fived each other and set about figuring out their mystery man's identity, starting with the police database and working their way from there.